The snow was falling so heavily over London that it felt like the city was being erased from the map, just like Rose Sterling had tried to erase herself from the Duke's memory. Everyone said Sebastian Vance, the Duke of Blackwood, was a man who never took no for an answer. But when Rose sent his gold-embossed Christmas invitation back to him, torn in half and stained with tea, she thought that would be the end of it. She was wrong. She didn't know that while she shivered in her frozen apartment, the Duke was already crossing the city in a carriage driven by fury. She thought she was safe in her poverty. But 5 minutes from now, her door is going to splinter open, and the man she spent 3 years running from will be standing in her hallway, demanding the one thing she cannot give him: the truth. The cold in London that winter was not merely a temperature, it was a physical weight, a living thing that pressed against the windows of number 14 Bell Court. Inside the cramped third-floor garret, Rose Sterling sat wrapped in a fraying woolen shawl that had once been a vibrant crimson, but was now the color of dried blood. She stared at the small iron grate of the fireplace. There was no coal left. The bucket was empty, just a collection of black dust at the bottom. The only heat came from a single, dying ember, and the twisted piece of thick, cream-colored paper she had just fed to the flames. It was the envelope, the heavy, expensive stationery of the House of Blackwood. Watching the ducal crest curl and blacken in the fire, Rose felt a tear freeze on her cheek before it could even fall. She hadn't just refused the invitation. She had burned the only bridge back to the life she used to know. "It is better this way," she whispered to the empty room. Her breath plumed in the air, a ghost of her former self. 3 days ago, the invitation had arrived. His Grace, Sebastian Vance, Duke of Blackwood, requests the pleasure of Lady Rose Sterling's company at the Christmas Eve ball. The courier who delivered it had looked at her building with open disdain. A tenement house sandwiched between a tannery and a gin shop. He had looked at Rose, with her rough, chapped hands and the plain grey dress of a seamstress, and asked if she was the maid. "I am Rose," she had said, chin high, though her stomach rumbled with hunger. She had taken the invitation, walked upstairs, and written a single line on the RSVP card. "I cannot attend. Please do not ask again." She hadn't told him the truth. She couldn't tell him that Lady Rose Sterling no longer existed. She couldn't tell him that after her father, the Earl of Crestwood, had shot himself following the scandal of the great bank collapse of '87, she had been left with nothing but debts and shame. She couldn't tell Sebastian that the reason she refused his invitation wasn't pride. It was because she had pawned her last silk dress 6 months ago just to pay for rent and medicine for her ailing landlady, Mrs. Higgins. If she went to the ball, she would have to walk there in broken boots. She would be a spectre of poverty amidst the diamonds and velvet of the aristocracy. He wouldn't understand, she told herself, rubbing her freezing hands together. Sebastian Vance was the richest man in England. He had inherited the title 3 years ago, just after she disappeared from society. He knew nothing of hunger. He knew nothing of counting pennies to buy a loaf of stale bread. The wind howled outside, rattling the loose window pane. The candle on the table flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness, save for the faint orange glow of the dying paper in the grate. Rose closed her eyes, trying to sleep, hoping to dream of warmth. But then she heard it. The sound of horses. Not the slow, plodding clip-clop of the dray horses that usually pulled carts down Bell Court. This was the thunderous, rhythmic strike of high-bred stallions. Iron shoes sparked against the cobblestones below. Then silence. Then the heavy thud of boots on the wooden stairs. Thump, Thump, thump. They were angry steps, purposeful. They didn't stop at the first floor, nor the second. Rose stood up, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She backed away toward the window, clutching her shawl tighter. Who would come here at this hour? The rent collector? A debt shark? The footsteps stopped directly outside her door. There was no polite knock. The handle turned violently. It was locked. "Rose!" A voice boomed from the other side. It was a voice she hadn't heard in 3 years, deeper now, rougher, like gravel wrapped in velvet. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Open this door," Sebastian commanded, "or I shall break it down." Rose couldn't move. Her feet seemed frozen to the rotting floorboards. "Go away," she cried out, her voice trembling. "You have the wrong apartment." "I have exactly the right apartment," came the growl. "Mrs. Higgins downstairs was quite helpful after I gave her £5. Open it, Ellie." Ellie. No one had called her that since the summer garden parties at Crestwood Estate, before the world fell apart. The sound of her nickname on his lips broke something inside her. With shaking fingers, she slid the bolt back. The door swung open, hitting the wall with a dull thud. Sebastian Vance filled the doorway. He was terrifyingly large, larger than she remembered. He wore a heavy greatcoat of black wool, the collar turned up against the snow, damp flakes melting on his broad shoulders. He held a silver-topped cane in one gloved hand, and his face, sharp-angled, with eyes as dark as the winter night, was set in a mask of furious disbelief. He brought the smell of winter, expensive tobacco, and leather into her tiny, stale room. He didn't speak immediately. He just looked at her. He took in the faded grey dress, the holes in her shawl, the fingerless gloves she wore inside. His gaze swept the room, the single wooden chair, the empty cupboard, the mattress on the floor, the fire that was nothing but ash. "So," he said softly, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. The air in the room seemed to vanish, replaced by his overwhelming presence. "This is where the Earl's daughter hides." "Get out, Sebastian," Rose said, trying to summon the haughtiness she used to possess. "It is improper for you to be here." "Improper?" He laughed, a harsh, humourless sound. "You refused my invitation, Rose. You sent it back torn." I had no letter opener," she lied, backing away until her legs hit the edge of the mattress. "You had no letter opener," he repeated, peeling off his leather gloves slowly, finger by finger. "Is that why you didn't write a letter of explanation? Is that why you vanished 3 years ago without a goodbye? I spent 6 months looking for you. 6 months, Rose. You were in France," she said defensively. "You were busy becoming a duke." "I came back for you," he roared, his composure cracking. The sudden volume made her flinch. He saw it and stopped, his jaw tightening. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "I came back to Crestwood to ask for your hand, and I found the house boarded up and your father in the ground. And you... gone. I had to leave," she whispered, looking down at her boots. "The debts, the shame. I couldn't let the new Duke of Blackwood be saddled with a pauper bride. Is that what you think of me?" He sounded genuinely hurt now. "That I cared about the money?" He walked toward the fireplace, inspecting the grate. He saw the charred remains of his invitation. He crouched down, picking up a fragment of the blackened paper with his long fingers. "No coal," he noted flatly. He stood up and walked to the window, running a finger over the ice on the inside of the glass. "No food on the table. I saw the pantry is open. There is nothing there but a heel of bread." "I am managing," Rose said, lifting her chin. "I work. I am a seamstress for Madame Valeraine on Bond Street. I pay my own way." "You are starving," he corrected her. He turned to face her, his eyes blazing. You are freezing to death in a tenement in the East End, while I sit in a house with 50 empty rooms and fires large enough to roast an ox. Did you hate me that much? Did you hate me so much you would rather freeze than ask for my help?" "It wasn't hate," Rose cried, the dam finally breaking. Tears hot and fast spilled over her cheeks. "It was dignity, Sebastian. It was all I had left. My father gambled away our future. I have nothing. If I came to you, I would be a beggar. I couldn't bear to see pity in your eyes. Not you. Anyone but you." Sebastian stared at her, the anger in his face slowly shifting into something unreadable. Pain, regret. He crossed the room in 2 long strides. Before she could retreat, he reached out and cupped her face in his hands. His palms were warm, so incredibly warm against her frozen skin. "You foolish, stubborn woman," he murmured, his thumb brushing away a tear. "You never looked at my eyes if you thought you would find pity there." For a second, the air crackled between them. Rose felt the magnetic pull that had always existed between them, the reason she had run so hard. She didn't just run from poverty. She ran because she loved him, and she refused to ruin him with her disgrace. Then Sebastian pulled away abruptly. He turned his back to her, buttoning his coat. "Get your things," he commanded. "What?" "Get your things, Rose. Whatever you wish to keep. You are leaving." "I can't," she protested. "I have work tomorrow. Madame Valeraine will fire me if I will buy Madame Valeraine's shop and burn it to the ground, if she objects," Sebastian said calmly, adjusting his cuffs. "You are coming with me. Tonight." "I am not going anywhere with you, Sebastian Vance." Rose grabbed the back of the wooden chair to steady herself. "You cannot just storm in here and order me about like one of your tenants. Watch me." Sebastian walked to the corner of the room where a battered leather valise lay gathering dust. He threw it onto the mattress. "Pack. You have 5 minutes. And if I refuse, then I will carry you over my shoulder, screaming, down 3 flights of stairs. And I assure you, the neighbors are already listening at the keyholes. Let us not give them more of a show." Rose looked at him. He was deadly serious. The set of his jaw told her there was no negotiation. And, truth be told, the cold was seeping into her bones so deeply that the thought of a warm carriage was intoxicating. "Where are you taking me?" she asked quietly. "To Blackwood House," he said, "to my London residence. And then tomorrow we travel to Rothvar Hall for Christmas." "I cannot go to Rothvar," she panicked. "The Christmas ball, the society. I have no clothes, Sebastian. Look at me." She gestured to her rags. "I will be a laughingstock. Lady Genevieve creates the guest list, does she not? She has always despised me. She will tear me apart." Sebastian paused. The mention of Lady Genevieve seemed to darken his mood further. "Genevieve does not rule my house," he said icily. "I do. And you will not be a laughingstock. You will be my guest." He grabbed a rough wool blanket from the bed, her only bedding, and scoffed at its thinness. He stripped off his own heavy greatcoat. "Put this on," he ordered, holding it out. "But you will be cold," she said. "Put it on." She slipped her arms into the coat. It was immense, heavy, and smelled of him, cedarwood and rain. The warmth was instant, enveloping her like a hug. She quickly packed her few meager possessions, a silver locket with her mother's picture, a book of poetry Sebastian had given her for her 16th birthday, which she had saved from the pawn shop, and her sewing kit. "Is that all?" he asked, his voice low. "That is all I have," she answered. He looked as if he wanted to punch the wall. Instead, he took the bag in one hand and offered her his arm with the other. "Come." They walked down the narrow, creaking stairs. As they descended, doors cracked open. Eyes peered out from the darkness. Mrs. Higgins, the chimney sweep from the second floor, the washerwoman from the basement. They watched in silence as the giant of a man in a silk waistcoat and fine linen shirt led the girl from 3B out into the snow. Outside, the carriage was waiting. It was a sleek, black brougham, with the ducal crest on the door in silver. 4 black horses stamped in the snow, their breath rising like steam engines. A footman in livery jumped down and opened the door. Sebastian handed her in. The interior was lined with crushed blue velvet. There was a copper foot warmer on the floor and a thick fur rug. As Rose sat down, sinking into the luxury she hadn't felt in years, the reality of what was happening hit her. She was being swept back into the world she had fled. Sebastian climbed in opposite her and tapped the roof with his cane. The carriage lurched forward. "Sebastian," she said, her voice small in the darkness of the carriage. "This doesn't change anything. I am still penniless. I still have the debts. My father's name is still ruined. You cannot fix this just by moving me to a different house." Sebastian leaned forward, the shadows playing across his sharp features. "You have no idea what I can fix, Rose," he said intensely. "But know this. I am not taking you to Rothvar just for Christmas." "Then why?" He looked out the window at the passing gas lamps of London, his expression hardening. "Because I received a letter yesterday too," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "From the man who claims he holds your father's final promissory note. He says he owns you, Rose. He says he is coming to collect." Rose's blood ran cold. "Mr. Thorne," she breathed. "Archibald Thorne," Sebastian confirmed. "He thinks he can threaten you. He thinks because you are alone, you are prey." Sebastian turned back to her, and his eyes were fierce, possessive. "He is about to discover that you are under the protection of the House of Blackwood now. And if he comes near you, I will destroy him." The journey to Rothvar Hall took hours, the carriage cutting through the snowy countryside like a blade through silk. By the time the iron gates of the estate loomed out of the mist, Rose had fallen into a restless sleep against the plush squabs, still wrapped in Sebastian's massive coat. She woke to the sound of gravel crunching beneath the wheels. "We are here," Sebastian said softly. He had been watching her sleep, his expression unguarded, filled with a longing he usually kept buried under layers of arrogance. Rose sat up, smoothing her hair. "Sebastian, look at me. I cannot walk into Rothvar Hall like this. I look like a beggar." "You look like a queen who has survived a war," he replied firmly. "Hold your head high. If anyone sneers, they answer to me." The carriage stopped. The doors opened. Rose stepped out, not into the cold, but into a flood of warm, golden light spilling from the massive entrance of the hall. A phalanx of servants stood waiting in 2 perfect lines. And there, standing at the very top of the stone steps, was Lady Genevieve Claremont. Genevieve was everything Rose was not at that moment, polished, pristine, and radiating wealth. She wore a gown of emerald green velvet that hugged her figure, diamonds glittering at her throat like shards of ice. Her blonde hair was piled high in an intricate coiffure, not a strand out of place. As Sebastian led Rose up the stairs, the servants bowed low, but Genevieve did not. She stood her ground, her blue eyes widening as she took in Rose's appearance, the grey rags peeking out from under the Duke's oversized coat, the worn boots, the hollow cheeks. "Sebastian?" Genevieve's voice was like a crystal bell, sweet but sharp. "When you said you had urgent business in London, I did not realize you were going scavenging." "Genevieve," Sebastian warned, his tone low and dangerous. "Lady Rose is my guest of honor. you will treat her with the respect due to her station." "Her station?" Genevieve let out a light, tinkling laugh. "My dear Sebastian, the whole world knows the Earl of Crestwood died a bankrupt criminal. This poor creature is no longer Lady anything. She is a charity case." She turned her gaze to Rose, a cruel smile playing on her lips. "Did you lose your way to the scullery entrance, my dear?" Rose felt the heat rise in her cheeks. The old Rose, the one beaten down by 3 years of poverty, wanted to shrink away. But the anger she had felt in her apartment earlier flared up again. She stepped out from behind Sebastian. She let the heavy coat slide off her shoulders, revealing her tattered grey dress in the unforgiving light of the chandelier. She stood tall, meeting Genevieve's gaze. "I may have lost my fortune, Lady Genevieve," Rose said, her voice clear and steady. "But I see you have lost none of your venom. It is comforting to know that some things never change, no matter how much silk you wrap them in." A silence fell over the entrance hall. The butler, Mr. Henderson, suppressed a cough that sounded suspiciously like a chuckle. Sebastian's lips quirked upward. He placed a hand on the small of Rose's back. "Henderson, prepare the blue suite for Lady Rose, and send for the dressmaker immediately. The Christmas ball is tomorrow, and my guest requires a wardrobe fitting of a future duchess." The word duchess hung in the air like a thunderclap. Genevieve's face went pale. "The blue suite?" Genevieve hissed as Rose was led away. "That is the mistress's suite, Sebastian. It is next to yours." "I am aware of the geography of my own house, Genevieve," Sebastian replied, not looking back. Later, in the bath, a copper tub so large Rose could float in it, filled with hot water, scented with lavender. She tried to scrub the grime of the East End from her skin, but she couldn't scrub away the fear. Sebastian had defended her. Yes. But why? Was it just pity? Or was it guilt? There was a knock on the door. It wasn't the maid. It was Genevieve. She breezed in without waiting for an answer, dismissing the maid with a wave of her hand. "Enjoying the water?" Genevieve asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Soak it up, Rose. It won't last." "What do you want, Genevieve?" Rose asked, sinking lower into the bubbles. "I want to warn you. Sebastian feels responsible for you. He has a savior complex. He thinks he can rescue the damsel in distress." Genevieve walked closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "But do you know why he really went to London to find you?" "Because of the debt," Rose said. "Because of Archibald Thorne." "Oh, you know about Thorne?" Genevieve raised an eyebrow. "But do you know why Thorne has the debt note? Do you know who sold it to him?" Rose froze. "What are you talking about?" "Your father didn't just borrow from banks, Rose. He borrowed from Sebastian's father, the old Duke. When Sebastian inherited the title, he found the notes. He could have forgiven them. But he didn't. He sold the debt to Thorne to teach your father a lesson in humility." Genevieve smiled cruelly. "Sebastian is the reason your father was ruined. He is the reason your father pulled the trigger. And now, out of guilt, he is trying to play the hero." Genevieve turned and left the room, leaving the door slightly ajar. Rose sat in the cooling water, her heart turning to stone. Sebastian sold the debt? Was he the architect of her misery? Had she just run into the arms of the man who destroyed her family? Dinner was a torture. Rose, dressed in a simple gown, hastily altered by the maids, sat at the long mahogany table. She barely touched her soup. Sebastian sat at the head, regal and imposing, while Genevieve chattered endlessly about the guest list for the ball. Every time Sebastian looked at Rose, she looked away. The warmth she had felt for him in the carriage was gone, replaced by a cold knot of betrayal. As soon as the meal was over, Rose excused herself. She didn't go to her room. She went to the library. She needed to know the truth. If Sebastian kept ledgers, they would be there. The library was a cavernous room, smelling of old paper and wax. A fire crackled in the hearth. Rose began pulling ledgers from the shelves, her hands trembling. "Looking for something?" She spun around. Sebastian was standing in the shadows of the doorway, a glass of brandy in his hand. He had loosened his cravat, looking tired. "I am looking for the truth," Rose said, clutching a ledger to her chest. "Genevieve told me." Sebastian sighed, walking into the light. "Genevieve says many things. What specific poison did she pour in your ear tonight?" "She said you sold my father's debt to Archibald Thorne. She said you are the reason we were ruined." Rose's voice cracked. "Is it true, Sebastian? Did you destroy us?" Sebastian set his glass down on a side table with a heavy clink. He looked at her, his dark eyes filled with a sudden, intense pain. "I did not sell the debt to Thorne," he said quietly. "I bought it from him." Rose blinked. "What?" "Your father was in deep with Thorne long before I inherited the title," Sebastian explained, stepping closer. "Thorne is a shark, Rose. He lends money to desperate aristocrats at illegal rates and then blackmails them. When I found out your father was trapped, I tried to buy the notes to clear them, to free him." "Then, why did he die?" "Because I was too late," Sebastian whispered. "I arrived at Crestwood the morning it happened. I had the papers in my hand, Rose. Papers that forgave every penny. I rode all night to get there. But as I rode up the driveway, I heard the shot." He looked away, staring into the fire. "I failed him. And then I found the house empty. You were gone. I thought I had failed you too. I spent 3 years thinking you were dead." Rose dropped the ledger. It hit the floor with a loud bang. The realization washed over her. He hadn't ruined her. He had tried to save them. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. "Because I was ashamed," he admitted. "I am a duke. I am supposed to be powerful enough to fix anything. But I couldn't save your father from his own pride." He turned back to her. The distance between them seemed to vanish. He reached out, taking her cold hands in his. "I didn't bring you here to collect a debt, Rose. I brought you here because I cannot breathe in a world where you do not exist." His thumb traced the inside of her wrist, sending shivers racing up her arm. The air in the library grew heavy, charged with the electricity of 3 years of suppressed longing. "Sebastian," she breathed. He leaned in, his gaze dropping to her lips. "Tell me to stop," he murmured. "Tell me to let you go, and I will walk out that door and never bother you again." "Don't go," she whispered. He crushed her to him. His mouth found hers, hungry, desperate, tasting of brandy and despair. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a reclaiming. Rose's hands tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, the years of loneliness melting away in the heat of his embrace. Suddenly, the library doors banged open. They broke apart, chests heaving. Mr. Henderson, the butler, stood there, looking pale and shaken. "Your Grace," he stammered. "I apologize for the intrusion. But a visitor has arrived." "At this hour?" Sebastian snarled, shielding Rose with his body. "Who is it?" "It is Mr. Archibald Thorne, Your Grace, and he has the local magistrate with him." Sebastian stiffened. "Thorne. He claims," the butler continued, his voice trembling, "that he has a warrant for Lady Rose's arrest." "Arrest?" Rose gasped, grabbing Sebastian's arm. "For what?" "For theft." A greasy, high-pitched voice came from the hallway. Archibald Thorne stepped into the room. He was a small, round man with a face like a ferret, wearing a suit that was too expensive and too tight. He held a cane with a gold head, and his eyes glittered with malice as they landed on Rose. "Good evening, Lady Rose," Thorn sneered. "Or should I say, the thief who stole the Crestwood diamonds before fleeing London." "I stole nothing," Rose cried. "Those diamonds were sold to pay the servants' wages." "Sold illegally," Thorn tutted, pulling a document from his pocket. "They were part of the estate, which was collateral for my loan. Technically, you stole my property, and the law is quite severe on thieves, my dear. Prison, or perhaps transportation to the colonies." Sebastian stepped forward, his voice a low rumble of thunder. "Get out of my house, Thorn." "I have the law on my side, Duke," Thorn smiled, revealing yellow teeth. "However, I am a reasonable man. I might be persuaded to drop the charges." "Name your price," Sebastian said instantly. Thorn's eyes slid over Rose's body in a way that made her skin crawl. "Not money, Your Grace. I have plenty of money. I want a wife. I need a title to gain entry to the inner circle, and Lady Rose, despite her poverty, has the blood of an earl." Thorn bowed mockingly. "She marries me tomorrow, and the warrant disappears. She refuses, and she spends Christmas in Newgate Prison." The morning of Christmas Eve dawned bright and cold, but inside Rothvar Hall, the mood was funereal. Sebastian had thrown Thorn out the night before, threatening to feed him to the hounds, but the threat remained. Thorn had given them until midnight tonight, the stroke of Christmas, to decide. Rose sat in her room, staring at the dress that had arrived. It was a masterpiece of midnight blue velvet, trimmed with silver lace that looked like frost. It was a dress meant for a duchess, but she felt like a prisoner. "You cannot do this," Sebastian had argued for hours. "I will fight him in the courts." "There is no time," Rose had replied. "He has the magistrate in his pocket. If I am arrested, my reputation is destroyed forever. I will be a convict." She knew what she had to do. She couldn't let Sebastian drag his name through the mud for her. She had to sacrifice herself. By evening, the carriages began to arrive. The sound of music and laughter drifted up from the ballroom. The cream of British society was gathering. Rose stood before the mirror. She put on the midnight blue dress. She clasped her mother's locket around her neck. She looked pale, but her eyes were dry. She was a soldier going to the gallows. She descended the grand staircase. The ballroom fell silent. The musicians stopped mid-note. Rose was a vision of tragic beauty. The dark blue dress made her skin look like porcelain, her red hair flaming against the dark fabric. She held her head high, descending the stairs with the grace of the royalty she was born to be. At the bottom of the stairs, Sebastian waited. He looked devastating in formal black tie, his ducal sash across his chest. But his face was a mask of fury and sorrow. He offered her his arm. "You look breathtaking." "Thank you, Sebastian," she whispered. "Dance with me? One last time?" "Do not say that," he hissed as he led her to the floor. The music started. A waltz. Sebastian pulled her close, tighter than was proper. As they spun across the floor, the world blurred. For a moment, it was just them. No debts, no Thorn, no poverty. Just the man she loved and the warmth of his hand on her waist. "I have a plan," Sebastian whispered in her ear as they turned. "Sebastian, don't trust me," he commanded. "When Thorn steps forward at midnight, do not say a word. Just look at me." The hours ticked by agonizingly fast. Midnight approached. The music stopped. The grandfather clock in the hall began to chime. Dong. Dong. The heavy doors of the ballroom swung open. Archibald Thorn entered, flanked by 2 constables. The crowd gasped. Thorn looked triumphant. He marched to the center of the room. "Midnight, Lady Rose," Thorne shouted, his voice echoing off the painted ceiling. "Have you made your decision? The wedding ring or the handcuffs?" Genevieve, standing near the punch bowl, smirked. This was the end of Rose Sterling. Rose's hand tightened on Sebastian's arm. She opened her mouth to surrender, to accept Thorne's proposal to save herself from prison. But Sebastian stepped in front of her. He looked at Thorne with an expression of utter boredom. "Mr. Thorne," Sebastian said, his voice carrying clearly to every corner of the silent room, "you seem to be laboring under a delusion." "The law is no delusion, Duke," Thorne spat. "She stole the Crestwood diamonds." "She could not have stolen them," Sebastian said calmly. "And why is that?" Thorne sneered. Sebastian reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small velvet pouch. He upended it into his palm. A necklace of dazzling diamonds spilled out, catching the light of the chandeliers. The crowd gasped. They were the legendary Crestwood diamonds. "Because," Sebastian said, holding them up, "she did not sell them. She gave them to me." Rose stared at him in shock. She had pawned them. She knew she had. How did he have them? 3 years ago, Sebastian lied smoothly, addressing the crowd. "Lady Rose entrusted these gems to me for safekeeping before she went into seclusion. They have been in the Blackwood vault this entire time. Therefore, no theft occurred. The collateral for your loan is safe, Thorne." Thorne's face turned purple. This is a trick. I have the pawn ticket. I tracked it to a shop in Cheapside." "A forgery," Sebastian dismissed him. "Are you calling the Duke of Blackwood a liar in his own home?" Sebastian took a step forward, his voice dropping to a terrifying growl. "You have trespassed. You have threatened my future wife, and you have bored my guests." "Constables!" The 2 officers, realizing the tide had turned and unwilling to cross a duke, stepped away from Thorne. "Escort this man off my property," Sebastian ordered. "If he returns, shoot him." Thorne sputtered, looking around for support, but the aristocracy had closed ranks. They smelled blood, and it was his. He turned and fled, the sound of his boots retreating like a scurrying rat. The ballroom erupted in whispers. Sebastian turned to Rose. He placed the diamonds around her neck. His fingers lingered on her skin. "Your future wife?" Rose whispered, her heart hammering. Sebastian got down on one knee. The room went silent again. Lady Genevieve dropped her glass of punch. It shattered loudly, but no one looked at her. "I told you I had a plan," Sebastian said, looking up at Rose with eyes full of love. "But I need you to agree to the final part of it." He took her hand. "Rose Sterling, I have loved you since the day you threw a snowball at me when we were 12. I loved you when you were rich, and I loved you when you were poor. I crossed London to find you, and I will cross the world to keep you. Will you marry me? Not to pay a debt, but to save my heart?" Rose looked down at him. The tears finally spilled over, but they were tears of joy. "Yes," she choked out. "Yes, Sebastian." He stood up and kissed her, a kiss that seared away the memory of the cold room in Bell Court, a kiss that promised a lifetime of warmth. The crowd erupted in applause. Outside, the snow continued to fall, burying the tracks of Archibald Thorne, leaving the world white and new. The euphoria of the proposal had settled into a quiet, glowing reality. But the storm inside Rothvar Hall was not quite over. While the snowdrifts outside grew higher, sealing the estate into a glittering white fortress, the internal politics of the house were reaching their breaking point. The morning after the ball, the guests were departing. Carriages lined the driveway, filled with hungover aristocrats, whispering about the Christmas miracle of the Duke's engagement. But in the drawing room, Lady Genevieve stood by the fireplace, her face pale and drawn. She was not packing. Rose entered the room, holding a cup of tea. She wore a simple morning dress of blue wool, warm, clean, and hers. She no longer felt like an imposter. "You are still here," Rose said softly. Genevieve turned. Her eyes were red-rimmed. For the first time, the veneer of perfection was cracked. She didn't look like a villainess. She looked like a woman who had bet everything on a hand of cards and lost. "I have nowhere to go, Rose," Genevieve admitted, her voice devoid of its usual malice. "My family. They expected this match. They have spent a fortune on my season, on my wardrobe, banking on the fact that I would become the Duchess of Blackwood. When I return to London as a failure, I will be the one in the attic." Rose looked at her. She remembered the cold of Bell Court. She remembered the gnawing hunger. She knew exactly what terrified Genevieve. It wasn't the loss of love. Genevieve didn't love Sebastian. She loved the title. It was the loss of security. Sebastian walked in at that moment, carrying a ledger. He stopped when he saw the two women. His instinct was to protect Rose, to order Genevieve out immediately. "The carriage is ready, Genevieve," Sebastian said coldly. "Wait," Rose said, raising a hand. Sebastian looked at her, surprised. "Rose, after what she said to you? After the lies?" "She was cruel," Rose acknowledged, walking closer to Genevieve. "But she was cruel because she was frightened. And I know what it is to be frightened of the world." Rose turned to Sebastian. "Do not send her back in disgrace. Let her stay until the new year. Let her leave with her dignity intact, telling the world that she realized she and you were not a match. Let her write the narrative of her departure." Genevieve looked up, shock registering on her face. "You would do that? After I mocked your poverty?" "I am not doing it for you," Rose said firmly. "I am doing it because I am the future Duchess of Blackwood, and the House of Blackwood does not crush those who are already defeated. We are better than that." Sebastian stared at Rose. In that moment, he saw not just the woman he loved, but a woman with the true heart of a ruler. He smiled, a genuine, proud smile. "As my future wife wishes," Sebastian bowed. "You may stay until the 2nd of January, Genevieve, but you will speak no ill of Rose, or you will find yourself walking to the station in the snow." Genevieve nodded, tears of humiliation and gratitude welling in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. She hurried out of the room, her power over them broken forever. The truth of the diamonds. Later that afternoon, in the quiet of the library, Sebastian finally explained the mystery of the necklace. He sat Rose down on the velvet sofa and took the diamonds from the safe. He placed them in her hands. "You were confused last night," he said. "You knew you had pawned them." "I did," Rose insisted. "I pawned them at a shop on Fleet Street, Mr. Solomon's shop. I got £50 for them to pay for my father's funeral." "I know," Sebastian said gently. "I found Mr. Solomon 2 years ago." Rose gasped. "You were looking for me then?" "I never stopped looking for you, Ellie. When I found the pawn ticket in your father's desk, I went straight to the shop. Mr. Solomon told me a young woman with sad eyes had sold them. He still had them. I bought them back for 5 times the price, and I made him promise that if you ever returned, he would send a message to me immediately." He took her hand, kissing her knuckles. "I kept them in the vault, waiting. Every Christmas, I took them out and looked at them, hoping that perhaps that year, the owner would return to claim them. I didn't know you were using a false name. I didn't know you were suffering. I thought I had to suffer," she whispered. "I thought I had to pay for my father's sins." "The debt is paid," Sebastian said fiercely. It was paid the moment you survived. Now, we live. The wedding, January 1st, 1890. They did not wait for the spring. Sebastian wouldn't hear of it. "I have waited 3 years," he declared. "I will not wait another season." The wedding was set for New Year's Day. It was a small affair by ducal standards, held in the private chapel of Rothvar Hall. The stone walls were decorated with thousands of white roses and holly berries. The air smelled of beeswax candles and winter pine. Rose did not wear a new dress. She refused the silk imported from Paris. Instead, she and the maids of the household took the midnight blue velvet gown she had worn to the ball and reworked it. They added white lace from her mother's wedding veil, which she had saved in her valise. When the doors of the chapel opened, the organ music swelled. Sebastian stood at the altar. He looked nervous. The man who could command armies and silence rooms with a glare was twisting his ring, terrified that she might change her mind. But then he saw her. Rose walked down the aisle not with a father, but alone. She walked with the strength of a woman who had saved herself. Her red hair shone like copper against the white lace. When she reached him, he didn't wait for the priest. He reached out and took her hand, pulling her to him as if he were anchoring himself to the earth. "Dearly beloved," the priest began. They spoke their vows in low voices, meant only for each other. "I, Sebastian, take thee, Rose, to be my shelter from the cold. I, Rose, take thee, Sebastian, to be my home." When they kissed, a cheer went up that shook the stained glass windows. Outside, the bells of the village church began to ring, signaling the start of a new year, a new decade, and a new life. The honeymoon. They did not go to Italy or France. They went back to London. On their first week as man and wife, Sebastian took Rose to Bell Court. The carriage stopped in front of the run-down tenement building. "Why are we here?" Rose asked, clutching his arm. The memories of the cold and hunger were still fresh. "Look," Sebastian pointed. Workmen were swarming the building. Scaffolding was going up. The broken windows were being replaced. The sign, "Bell Court Tenements," was being taken down. "I bought the building," Sebastian said, "and the one next to it, and the tannery." "What are you doing with it?" "We are turning it into the sterling home for women," Sebastian said. "It will be a residence for seamstresses, widows and women who have fallen on hard times. There will be coal in every grate, Rose. There will be hot food in the kitchen. No one will freeze here. Not ever again." Rose looked at the building, then at her husband. She buried her face in his coat and wept. They weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of healing. She had thought her suffering was meaningless, but Sebastian was helping her turn it into a sanctuary for others. The library at Blackwood House was warm and filled with the sound of laughter. A fire roared in the grate, so large it illuminated the entire room. Rose sat in the high-backed leather chair, a leather-bound journal on her lap. She was writing the final entry for the year. The winter has been harsh this year, but the granaries are full. Sebastian has spent the morning arguing with the House of Lords about the housing reform bill. He is so passionate, so determined to ensure that what happened to me never happens to another citizen of London. They call him the Red Duke because of his radical ideas, but I just call him my heart. "Mama!" The library door burst open. A small boy, perhaps 4 years old, with unruly black hair and bright blue eyes, ran into the room. He was followed by a toddler waddling in a white dress, giggling uncontrollably. "Leo! Sarah! Careful!" Sebastian's voice boomed from the hallway, though it was full of mirth. He appeared in the doorway, breathless, his cravat askew. The Duke of Blackwood, one of the most powerful men in England, was currently playing the role of a monster chasing his children. Leo jumped onto Rose's lap. "Papa is a bear! He's going to eat us!" "Is he now?" Rose laughed, smoothing her son's hair. "Well, I suspect this bear can be tamed with a mince pie." Sebastian walked over, leaning down to kiss the top of Rose's head. His hand rested on her shoulder, solid and warm. "Are you writing in your journal again?" he asked. "I am," she smiled. "I am writing about the day a very angry man kicked down my door and demanded I come home." "I didn't kick it down," Sebastian protested, picking up little Sarah. "I merely persuaded it to open. You terrified me," Rose teased. "And yet," Sebastian whispered, leaning down so only she could hear, "it was the best decision I ever made." A footman entered the room, clearing his throat. "Your Graces?" "The carriage is ready." "Where are we going?" Leo asked. "To the Sterling home," Rose said, closing her journal. "We have gifts to deliver." Every Christmas Eve, the family went to the East End. They brought toys, food, and coal. Archibald Thorne had eventually been arrested for fraud and died penniless in prison, a ghost of the past. But the Sterling home stood as a beacon of light in the dark streets of London. Rose stood up, surrounded by her family. She looked at the fire, not the dying ember of 5 years ago, but a roaring, life-affirming blaze. She touched the diamond locket at her throat. She had refused the Duke's invitation once, but she thanked God every day that he hadn't accepted her refusal. She took her husband's arm, and together they walked out into the snow, not to flee from it, but to welcome it. And that is the story of Rose and Sebastian. From the freezing garret of Bell Court to the warmth of Rothvar Hall, theirs is a reminder that sometimes the hardest walls to break down aren't the ones made of brick and mortar, but the ones we build around our own hearts. Rose thought her poverty made her unworthy of love, and Sebastian thought his wealth could fix everything but his own loneliness. It took a torn invitation and a leap of faith to bring them together. I hope this story warmed your heart as much as it did mine. It reminds us that pride can be a shield, but it can also be a cage. If you enjoyed this journey through Victorian London, the drama, the romance, and the justice served to Mr. Thorne, please let me know in the comments. Which part was your favorite? Was it the confrontation in the ballroom, or Sebastian's secret regarding the diamonds? If you want more historical romance stories filled with drama, twists, and deep emotion, please give this video a big thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more long-form stories like this one. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new upload. I have a new story coming next week about a runaway princess and a blacksmith that you won't want to miss. Thank you for listening, and until next time, keep the romance alive.